At the beginning of all my drawing activities, I was involved with meanderings of going from flower to flower like a bee. These meanderings were sort of confusions that I engaged in my life, not by desire, but by chance, by the situation. As we look out there, we see all kinds of pieces and activities. And I've always been a person that goes from flower to flower, gathering pollen and leaving evidence that I've been there. I was always looking for a device that would open up the situation for another thing. What the other thing was, I never knew what I was looking for. Maybe the essence or a persona of a presence that would translate into some kind of force. I remember finding a piece of oilcloth in Tijuana, and I took a large piece of tracing paper and copied all the forms on the flowers in the oilcloth. It was a floral rose patterns. And then I transferred those with the carbon paper onto a piece of Strathmore board. And then I drew those in with graphite. And it was like filling the cells of the roses in, much like the pressure when you have a tooth filled and they put silver and it squeaks as it goes into the thing. And I wanted to press this in the same way, that with intention. And I thought if I did it enough times and filled it in hard enough, it would turn inside out and expose the presence of magic, that it had a presence of magic. They didn't. I remember no matter how hard I pressed and did these drawings. And then I started incorporating dimension lines that would be in the drafting like they were dimensions of the forms that I drew. And then I would fill those forms in. Sometimes the form would be the thing, only the pressure of the graphite repeated over and over and over again in short little 1/4-inch lines. Well, I think I was compelled to keep everything on a vertical horizontal. That's why the grid paintings was the real shift, because I could rotate that vertical horizontal grid 45 degrees, and so it would sit on it. It wouldn't reinforce the perimeter of the paper. I wanted the image to be in the environment that the paper would set up, but it wouldn't be the reinforcement of that. And the geometric forms may have come out with the rigorous execution of doing geometric forms that I didn't understand. I would have thought that at that time conceptually I would have understood it, but I had a blank in my brain that blocked out certain areas and opened up others. The ones that opened up were the ones that the drawings invention comes out, and the closures happened because I wanted to be in control. I was also always very interested in architecture and the structure of a thing and the formation of it and making the plans. How can I play with that vertical, horizontal, and a structure? I remember seeing a house in downtown Los Angeles. It was an old craftsman house, and I love craftsman architecture. And there was a wallpaper, and it had a very faded tan repetition all over the walls. And I remember I did some graphite drawings and prints imitating the attitude of these floral patterns on this tan wallpaper that was all faded, and it sort of had a mutant attitude that it wasn't what it was something else. And I wanted to do these drawings that were, is the wall on the drawing or is the drawing on the wall? Reversing its situation. I always liked the idea of reversing and what's on the other side of the mirror. And I like the idea that we didn't know what's on the other side. I don't know. And I'm only pressuring to get to the other side. Not that I ever do. Not that it'd ever be the other side, but it had intention to be on the other side. If I pressed hard enough and with enough intention, it would transfer or mutate into another situation. Mutation was the idea that it would start out with one thing and it would mutate into another thing. I remember when I first saw those Navajo blankets, I was really intrigued by them. There was things called lazy lines, where the warp and the weaving went to a certain spot, and it left a diagonal in there. And I remember they invited possibilities by making lines without making a line in the usual form. And the designs in those really fascinated me. And I took these snap lines, and instantaneously you'd have a line. I found out that you just weren't stuck with the blue that's usually in snap lines. You can put powdered pigments, and I got all these powders and put them in the torpedoes so I could get red, blue, green, yellow, or whatever I wanted. And instantaneously I had it. And in order to make the lazy line, I took a piece of masking tape and I would just tape around different places on it. So when the line hit that place, it would be stopped by the thin piece of tape. So it would set up a thing like the lazy lines, but they weren't lazy lines. They were another way of a painting would appear out of that. And it would set up a whole new situation where I could make a painting without doing a painting. I'd become friends with Jim Terrell, who was a really brilliant guy. And he was interested in Eastern philosophy like I was. He made some wonderful things that followed up with that. Anyway, I decided in the gallery that I would take out this false ceiling. And in doing that, I thought I opened up the paper on the roof. The light came through those diagonal slats on the roof and made vertical patterning. And I took rice polishing and threw it in the air so you could see the actual light rays coming down. And when you looked up and saw the flat plane of the blue sky, it just became a blue plane. And that sort of intrigued me when it was just the slats with the light coming through and making a pattern on one wall. And it would start in the morning and make a pattern on one wall. It would crawl across the ceiling, what there was, and go down the other side. So it would do a complete circle in encompassing this space in a circle form, a spiral form that would go on to a flat plane, but was actually the sky that was infinite, had no beginning and no end. You know, artists like to talk about their foreign relationship to life. By that I mean, what are you doing? I ask myself that, why are you an artist? What are you doing? And I said, well, I'm leaving marks or tracks of where I've been. Much like the primitive man when he saw his footprint in mud or in wet sand or left a bloody handprint on a wall, leaving an indication that he exists. The big thing was, are we talking about our existence or giving an image or leaving a mark that we exist? We want to define we exist. And the drawing show is engaging in that kind of activity. There doesn't seem to be any consistency, but now that I look at it, there is consistency of a confused person that's looking for control. Later on, learning that I don't want to be in control, I want to be in tune. So these meanderings are like the path of a confused person. In this path of a confused person, that I realize path is goal, or goal is path.